Kaplan from Kaplan Cycles, right here, down here in the restoration shop. We're on site at the New England Motorcycle Museum, of course, and we got a special treat for you today. If you hear some wrenches spinning in the background, we've got a special guest today, George Sajowski from Maroney Harley Davidson. George, how you doing?
Let me interrupt you. That's Sajarski.
Sajowski. I asked him. I said I want to ask him to spell it, and he couldn't spell it, and he's known it forever. So, anyways, George is the #1 Harley engine performance builder in New England, probably one of the best in the country, if not the East Coast. He's built multiple national caliber bikes, and he offered to build my engine on my Dyna CVO 110. So thank you for coming down today, George.
Yeah, this is great.
You started at Maroney back. What year did you start there?
1990. Yeah, a long time ago.
So coming up on 30 years. You must be getting up there. How old are you?
I'm 56 now.
Yeah, you look good for 56. In any event, this engine build here today, we're doing kind of how would you describe this? Is it like a stage 2 or stage?
I've never been one of those guys for a whole stage thing. That's a marketing thing. Yeah. That's essentially all we're doing. I mean, the CVO that you've got here, the CVO Dyna, it's already 110 inch. Yeah. And really, let's face it, it has to be, emissions friendly. Yep. So we're going to make it a little less friendly, but we're going to make it a whole lot more fun for you to ride, but yet still run on pump gas, still run in traffic, and when you decide to stretch your legs, you're going to have a great time.
But we had discussed when you came down last week, or the week before, that the CVO 110, even though it's got probably over 90 horsepower, it seems to sign off early. The rev limiter is probably programmed a little too low.
Well, it's not so much that. It's just got a very short duration camshaft because, again, it has to be emissions friendly. Yep. Everybody that manufactures everything, it has to meet an emission standard. Yep. So this is an early attempt at Harley Davidson to get a large displacement, high torque engine that met emissions. So these are one of the things they had to do. Yep.
So, even though it's a lot of fun to ride, it kind of paled in comparison to my FXR that's set up the right way upstairs.
Rev.
Absolutely. And I think one of the first things you mentioned was the pipes. It's got a set of Reinhardt's on here now, Reinhardt's 2 and the 2s, and you had mentioned for a few reasons these weren't the right ones.
Well, people love the traditional drag pipes. They love the sound, they love the look. And let's face it, it does have that. But if you are looking for a streetable motor, okay, you don't want to put a real long duration camshaft because now you're going to rob all your torque to get your top end. Well, how about we put a shorter duration camshaft and we put a 2-into-1 on it, such as the one that you got from Bassini.
Yeah, this is the pipe that George recommended over here. There was a couple he mentioned, I think D&D, Bassini, and Thunderheader was one.
Thunderheader's another excellent one.
So there was a particular spec on this. You said to go with the single step pipe.
That was simply because of the displacement of your motor. You didn't want to go too big on the step because you don't want the head pipe diameter to get too large.
So this 2-into-1 will give us the results we're looking for, is a little better revving.
Give us a bike that's got great power down low, totally streetable when you're in traffic, 2 up, idling in traffic, no problem. It's not going to be stally or any of that crap. And yet at the same time, you'll get your pump gas 45 miles to the gallon steady cruise, and then when you lay the wheat to it, you'll have a good time.
So we're doing a cam. The cam is actually a Screaming Eagle cam from the Screaming Eagle Performance part. This engine is a Screaming Eagle engine, but as George said,
CVO 110. It's a little different.
Yeah, so it's detuned a little bit for emissions, right?
Yeah.
So this cam's going to give us a little more lift in duration and allow it to rev the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Describe this piece right here, this absolute jewel over here. This is a Screaming Eagle part number.
Screaming Eagle. Basically, it's an aluminum billet cam support plate. And basically what it does is it gives torsional stability because, obviously you've got your camshafts running here and you also have your oil pump on the backside running. So if this is flexing, anytime there's flex or movement, you have a loss of power. So this stiffens all of that up. Yep.
And this is the actual cam that he's installed.
One of them. This is a front cylinder camshaft. As you can see, it's going to run into there. And then obviously the other side is supported inside the engine so that it's supported on both sides. And of course it's a twin cam, so you have your rear cylinder one as well. And then at the same time you have an oil pump that goes on there, and that's driven right off the PTO or the pinion shaft, the crankshaft.
I'm excited. Daytona, here we come. Might give Junior a run for his money at the drag strip on his 1250cc Sportster.
You better watch out, man.
We're going to Orlando, here we come. This is the Piston Kit. This is
a little higher compression, same displacement, just a little higher compression.
Can you zoom in on that? Screaming Eagle high compression piston kit, right?
Yep.
That'll give it a little extra snap.
Yeah, just going to put it essentially with the stock combustion chamber. It puts it at approximately 10.5 to 1 compression ratio.
So I had a little trouble sleeping this weekend because was so excited about this. Today feels like Christmas for me because this is the bike we're taking down the bike week, and we're going to shred it all week long down there. So probably need a tire when I get back, but I'm really looking forward to this. So we got the exhaust, we got the cam, we've got the pistons,
cam plate,
the cam plate, and there was a couple other goodies in here too.
Yeah, those are the cam, because obviously the 07 and later, the motors went from the regular spring tension cam chain adjusters to a hydraulic system. And these are just new hydraulic pads that, run against it, that's all.
Like fueling.
Yep, yeah, it's a little different material, it's a little more slippery, and it lasts longer as well.
And here's the magic right here. This is the real magic piece here. Describe this.
This is an extremely important part there. That's from a company called TTS, and it's the Master Tune 2, obviously. Steve Cole is the designer and manufacturer of these, and basically it allows me to go into the ECM via a PC and a set of cables, because that doesn't get installed on the bike. It's nothing more than a piece of communication hardware. So I plug into the motorcycle, and now with the software, it allows me to manipulate any of the lookup tables in the ECM that, with the physical changes that we've made, we can make correct. Because if you were to try and run your stock flash, obviously we've got more compression, longer duration. The computer only knows what it knows. It knows its lookup tables, that's it. It's not like a carburetor where it kind of adjusts. These don't do that.
If any of this went over your head, just know this is going to be really freaking fast compared to the way it was. And it was already pretty fast, so it's going to make some great sounds, and it's going to go really fast, and it's going to rev to the moon. So this thing would do 110 miles an hour in fifth gear with Christy on the back going uphill. It still had plenty left, so I have no idea how fast it's going to be when we're done, but I think really fast is a safe bet. So we got a brand new set of tires on there. Some nice Metzlers, and the bike only has 3,500 miles on it, or 3,800 miles. This is a Dyna CVO one-year model. This bike retailed for about $26,000 back in 2007. It was really expensive because it came with some really expensive accessories. Right from the factory, it had the upside-down fork kit, the mags, and about 10 grand worth of catalog items from Harley Davidson, including a custom paint job. So this is probably the holy grail of Dynas from that era, from 2007. If you're looking for a performance Dyna, George was explaining to me the Fxdse, which is a cult following on that from 99 to 2005, is one of the best for a few different reasons, better than even like the new Dyna S, last year the Dyna S. The Fxdse, that was better for a few different reasons. One, you said that it had a little narrower tire, so it handled a little bit better, right?
Well, yeah, the motorcycle was a little shorter wheelbase. The steering stem angle obviously was brought in a little bit, so you had steeper rake, so the bike would turn quicker. Granted, right from the factory, the suspension was a little soft, but any of these guys today that are looking to make a performance build, it's a better platform to start with.
The things that are very difficult to change, like the steering rake and angle and wheelbase.
You're talking major changes now because you're actually altering a frame, whereas the older ones you didn't have
This
to.
bike, the front end's kicked out. It's a little more of a cruiser look. It's not going to handle as good. 21-inch front wheel, it's not going to, the way a guy like George, who has a professional level riding skills, will slide that Harley at 70 miles an hour, around corners and for stunt riding or going really fast and surprising jet bike riders, that type of frame is more along the lines of what the FXR, more along the lines of like what is really probably the best handling Harley ever, the FXR, right?
FXRs were fantastic, no doubt about it. I mean, I'm not an Evo guy. That's why I love the DX because of the twin cam.
Yeah.
But yeah, the FXR chassis, the design with the motor mounts and everything simply made that bike work. It handled very well.
So, Christy, this one's for you. This after our little fiasco with you flying off the back of the FXR, we've got a Screaming Eagle brace to keep my honey from flying off the back. So it should be a lot of fun. Here's the Bassani pipe. There's also another issue this bike has stock from the factory, other than being a little choked up due to the EPA stuff that George mentioned and not programmed to rev out. The shocks on this are lowered a little bit over an FXDX. About an inch shorter, I think, than an FXDX.
Yes, yeah. This bike is lower and everything. I mean, if you just take a look here, even with you having this on the jack, if you look at the chassis and you look at the angle of the swing arm, you can see it's, even at full extension, it's almost in a pro squat instead of an anti-squat. Your longer shocks now, okay?
These shocks?
Yeah, your longer shocks now, as you can see, you can see there's a huge difference. So now we're going to change this angle down at the same time we're raising the bike. So with that, you're going to get more lean angle of the motorcycle through the corners. You're going to put a pro squat into an anti-squat, which means instead of the bike spinning so easy, the bike's going to grab traction and take off.
Better for wheelies.
Absolutely. Okay. And then, of course, you know, it's an Olean, so it's going to handle.
It's got the bling, too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
What are the other shocks that you recommend for Dynas? What do you think of the Legend line?
Legend's got some great stuff. I mean, there's lots of great shocks out there. Just, you know, it's all a matter of what you want to spend. I mean, you know, Legends has stuff that's affordable, and then they have some high-end stuff. You know, so it's what you're looking for. Legends has a broader line where, like, Olean specializes in high-end stuff. I mean, you can get really silly high-end, but Legends gives you a broader range.
Yep.
Progressive has a decent range, things like that.
So basically, I think a set of shocks, they started around 400 for $450 for a set of progressives. Olean started around 800. These are from the black line selection. They come all blacked out. This is about a $1,200 set of shocks. It has the gold reservoir, which is a little bit more. So these are about $1,300. You can spend even more than that, but this is a good mid-range shock or upper mid-range shock. So back to the engine work, which is the main focus today. The heads are going to come off. The cylinders are going to come off. The high compression pistons are going to be installed. The cams are going to get changed. And then he's going to program it. So then we're going to take it for a rip later. So stay tuned. We're going to have this fire-breathing dragon burning rubber up the street here, hopefully a little bit later today. So is there anything else you'd like to add about this particular build or this bike, George?
Yeah, I think you're just going to have a great time. It's a, you know, the CVO is a fun bike. Obviously, it's got the look. You know, they had Harley spent a lot on, you know, even the inverted fork. You know, there's just many special things that they did with it. So it's a great looking motorcycle. All we're doing is putting a little bit more fun into the motor, so it's just going to make it a lot of fun to ride.
Sounds good to me. Again, if you want a performance Harley Davidson, George has people that come from all over the country to Maroney Harley Davidson to have him build his bikes. A lot of celebrities, baseball players, and racers. The people in the know that's the shop to go to if you want a really well-built, high-performance Harley engine. So give Maroney's a call, and George will hook you up. So stay tuned. We'll have this baby up and running in no time. Hey guys, George is about 90 minutes into this. He's making a lot of progress here. It's a critical point. I wanted to show you exactly what's going on here. He's just replaced some of the bearings. George, tell us where we're at.
Well, essentially, we've got obviously the front cylinder and head off, so you can see the exposed piston. Obviously, you can see the difference between the two. I went ahead and pulled the hydraulic tappets out. So now I was able to pull the cam plate. Able to pull the cam plate, which of course supports the cams, like we were talking about before with the billet one that you got now. This is your old oil pump here. I don't have the new one with me in my hand, but the main difference between this one and the other one is you can see the rotors here. Yep. Well, the rotors on the other one are slightly larger in diameter, so obviously increased flow, increased pressure.
So it's a high-performance oil pump.
Exactly.
In case you ever modify it more, or just for longevity, or?
Well, it's just not only does it improve a little bit of the lubrication, the feeding, obviously, but remember, Harley's a dry sump engine. The oil actually belongs in the oil tank, not in the motor. The engine is what makes your oil hot. You don't want it to stay in there. You want it out as fast as, you know, if not faster than putting it in. So the improved scavenging on the Screaming Eagle pump is the main benefit. It gets the oil out of the motor and back in the tank.
So you think it'll run a little cooler?
Well, it helps not so much engine temperature, but it helps control oil temperature.
Okay, excellent. So these are the original cams here, and George is replacing that with a high-performance Screaming Eagle set with a longer lifting duration. That's original oil pump, and this is original cam plate. All of that's getting replaced with top-of-the-line stuff, and of course the pistons are going to be replaced also. This bike had 3,000 miles on it, and after first looking at it, George doesn't think it's ever been serviced. A couple of the engine mount bolts on the top, which is something they normally check. So it's probably
it's all part of your first service. You know, everybody hears about their 1,000-mile service, and a lot of guys, well, I do my own services, things like this. Well, okay, you know, cool.
They don't know the tricks of the trade.
Yeah. There's, you know, like Dynas, for instance, steering stem bearings, motor mounts, things like this. There's things that we do at the Harley shop that do need attention, especially when they're brand new.
Yep.
And this one was a telltale that it didn't have that.
Is this bracket staying on here?
No, it's going to be coming off because that's your old exhaust bracket for your Reinhardts. Your Piston Kit came with a new one.
Are you using these bolts again or no?
No, that's going to be all changed.
Okay, the reason I ask is I would run them on the wheel. I would have my detail guy clean them up.
It's going to be all different.
Okay, awesome.
We're going to have to find shorter ones.
Is there anything else you'd like to show the
Actually, we're
viewers on
pretty
this?
solid now. We're gonna get more of this apart, and I'll have Kenny come back over here when I get the new cam plate and cams and everything built up, and he'll be able to show you that and see the difference going on in there.
Inside the throttle body, the debris that's on there, is that like just
Oil.
burnt gas or oil? Or?
Oil.
It's oil, yeah.
You gotta remember, you know, God, I don't even remember the year, but Harley went to a top breather. Okay, so they breathe out of here, no more breathing out of the bottom. You know, Harley's, you know, had a notorious for, you know, leaving their spot. Well,
Yeah.
that was because the breather would drip on the ground.
The FXRs used to do that, right?
Well, the old FXRs, bottom
they would
breathers.
sump, like
Well, that if you let it sit long enough, that's a whole nother problem.
Yeah. Like a quart of oil to shoot out the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah. But in any case, you know, Harley went to a top breather. Now, part of that and part of emissions is obviously the venting of the oil fumes is supposed to go into the air cleaner, through the throttle body, into the motor, and be burnt. That's emissions. So that's why Harleys will always have just that little bit of residue inside there, and especially guys that are like, when full is good, but a little extra is better.
Yeah.
Okay, those guys really suffer from that, so don't do that.
So when you resurrect an old FXR or a shovel, and it's been sitting for years, and you start it up, and the oil shoots out the bottom.
Yeah, because
describe exactly the phenomenon that creates that.
Well, what's going on is any Harley, okay, because there's several different models, soft tails, you know, blah, blah, blah. Any of them have an elevated oil tank. So in other words, the oil tank's up here, not under the motor. Well, what happens is, let's face it, gravity takes over, and from sitting, the oil slowly works into the engine. Well, especially those old bottom breathers, okay, when you started that thing up, it pumped it out the breather way faster than it could pump it back into the tank.
So is it inside where the crank is housed
Yes.
and below the pistons?
It would fill the motor right up.
Will it go all the way up to the pistons, or
Well, if you have that much oil in your tank, sure.
could it hydrolock with that much oil in there? Or,
Well, you could cause damage if there was enough in there, sure.
it could bend your cranks, right?
Well, no, you wouldn't really do that, but you could definitely, you know, maybe fracture a case or blow a seal, you know, the main seal on the PTO side, your primary side.
Yeah. I know on the
you know,
on the
things
Jap
like
bikes,
that.
the multi-cylinder Jap bikes, we deal mostly with vintage bikes here, and I would say 7 out of 10 have fuel issues, especially ones that have been sitting for more than a year or so.
Well, here you've got that situation that's similar. You have your gas tank, and then you have carburetors.
Yep.
So now the carburetors sit for a long period of time. They get a little scuzzed up. So now you got that little tiny leaking past your needle and seat, and the gas tank's sitting above it, gravity feeding, fills the motor full. And then what's really cool is people don't realize not only does it go in the combustion chamber, but it eventually washes your cylinder walls down, and it's in the bottom of the motor.
Yeah.
So
it's
you
bad.
go and you check the oil, and the thing is 4 quarts over full. You're like, what the hell? And then you smell it. It's because all your gas is in there.
Yeah, from what I've heard, that can do major damage to your engine too.
Oh, big time. Do not start it. You will smoke the bearings right out of it.
And possibly,
Especially a plain bearing motor. You know, the old stuff, the
can it
roller
bend a
bearing
crank?
motors. If it actually locked, sure. Yeah.
Awesome. We've seen that a bunch of times here with the vintage bikes where the engines are full of fuel.
Yeah, actually the real old stuff, you probably on a multi-cylinder, you probably have more of a problem because remember those old cranks were a build-up crank. In other words, they were pressed together.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So you press it apart to put a new rod on. Well,
Yep.
just like a single-cylinder dirt bike like those, for instance, you know, you had that on your multis as well. Well, if you had a lot of fuel and the thing locked up, let's say one cylinder did, well, you wouldn't actually bend anything, but what would happen is where the pin is pressed, the flywheels would scissor. So now if you did get it out and you got the thing running, you've got this hellacious vibration going on. That's why.
So there you have it, folks. The engine is dismantled. The new parts are going in. These bearings, did we talk about the bearings you're putting in versus the ones that came out yet? I know you mentioned something to me off
I took the stock inner cam bearings out of it. It's a quality bearing, and Harley went to the slightly larger size in 07, in fact. This was the first year for that. Because they wanted more surface area because they had some inner cam bearing failures on the earlier twin cams. And one of the first remedies on those twin cams was to go to like a Torrington or a Timken bearing, which eliminated the gaps in between the rollers, so you had more surface area.
Where's the bearing you took out? We looked at that a second ago.
I think I threw it away.
The bearings that came out of there was a big gap in the middle of them. And what kind of bearing was that called?
That was just the stock Harley
Stock
roller bearing.
And the Timken bearing has no gap in between, which makes it more
Torrington
solid.
Bearings is what we're putting in now.
Yeah,
I don't know if
Torrington.
your camera. Here's a flashlight. Maybe you can see, but you can see the gaps in between the rollers.
When those wear out, there's going to be a little bit of
Well,
flare.
it doesn't give as much surface area for the load. And then if you take your camera and look at these bearings in here,
There's no gap.
You can see there's no gap. It's all rollers. So you got like 40% more surface area to deal with the load, which comes from taller lift, longer duration, higher RPMs, more stress.
George, the twin cams, one of the bum raps that got, and a lot of guys who really are in the Evo say the Evo is better because it doesn't have the issues with the cam issues that the twin cam had with the plastic parts wearing out. Can you describe that phenomenon? Where is that plastic part that wears out?
Okay, well,
and what years had that issue?
Sure. Well, in '99 when they first came out, all the way to '06, all right, they had a spring-loaded tensioner. So no hydraulics, no nothing. It was just a heavy-duty spring that had a little pad, and it pushed very hard on the chain to maintain tension in the chain. Okay. Well, then in '07, okay, they switched to a hydraulic tensioner. And what's nice about hydraulic is when the RPMs come down, okay, the pressure backs off. So the pressure isn't as high because let's face it, when does a Harley get hot?
When you're
Sitting in traffic.
Yeah, or when you're
Sitting in traffic. What? Speed though, you're getting air. It's an air-cooled engine. So when it's idling, it's getting hot. So this helps reduce some of the pressure. And because it's hydraulic, it's forced lubrication now. Before it was only sling. So now you have forced lubrication and you have less pressure at idle with increased pressure at RPM.
So the longevity of the original one was what, 20,000 miles roughly? The original one?
The old spring tensioner ones?
Yeah.
I typically would tell my customers, because Harley didn't actually have a service interval for that, I would typically tell my customers at 30,000 miles, let's look at it. Now, if I knew the customer well and I knew their riding environment, okay, then I would say, nah, you're good, or we definitely want to do it. Basically, the environment is what dictates it. If you're doing a lot of idling in traffic, those things would burn right up. If you're a guy out on the highway, always at 70, 80 miles an hour all the time, I've had twin cams come in from the early 2000s with 80,000 miles on them, and those things not wore out.
So it's kind of a not true. The myth of them being a weak link isn't really true. It's more how you ride the bike.
Well, it was about the environment. You know, it had its strong points, it had its weak points.
If you're sitting in traffic at Daytona and Sturgis and Laconia for 10 hours 3 times a year.
But then again, when is that ever good for any air-cooled Harley?
Exactly. It's really bad. So the new setup, the hydraulic chain tensioner, what is the projected longevity of that?
Oh God, I've got guys that are big-time cross-country guys. I've seen 90, 100,000 miles on these things, and a third of the way wore.
It's not an issue then.
No.
What about how long miles for, let's say, an average ridden Dyna? Sometimes hard, but normally just driven normally by the average rider. How many miles are you seeing out of these Dyna engines?
As far as the engine itself overall?
Yeah, before you.
As long as it's properly maintained, it's a 100,000-mile motor.
And then it's rebuildable, unlike some other
Absolutely.
bikes. You can
Absolutely.
do the crank and the.
Sure. I mean, there's particular ones, like for instance, the CVO that you've got. There's certain things about these that are a little more sensitive than, say, like a regular twin cam 88, especially. The smaller ones are actually way tougher than these big inch ones.
Yeah, it's going to have more heat, right?
Well, there's more heat, and you've got less material for less torsional stability. There's so many things that we could go over about that, but in any case, like an 88-inch, twin cam, if it's properly maintained, it's 100,000 miles, even beating on it.
The first twin cam was an 88, right?
88-inch, yes.
88-inch, and then it went up to a 90.
Well,
96 or.
Well, the Screaming Eagle stuff, they had the 95 kits, and then they had the 103 kits and things like that. But then from factory Harley, what they wound up doing is they went from the 4-inch stroke with the bore that made it 88-inch. Then they went to a 4 3/8 stroke, okay, with the same bore, which turned it into a 96-inch. Yeah. So that's why a lot of people get confused. They think they can take their 88 and they make it a 96. No, because the stroke is still the 4-inch stroke. It's not the 4 3/8 stroke. So by going to the larger 3 7/8 bore, it's a 95. Whereas the later model 07s and such had the 4 3/8 stroke with a smaller bore, so they're actually a 96-inch. Smaller piston, but longer stroke.
So how did the 07 for, so the standard model was 88 and then it was 96. What year did they change to the 96?
07.
07? And then from there, where'd it go from there?
Well, then you had factory 103s, factory 110s, obviously.
So what changes? So this is basically, you said a 07 was 93? I'm sorry, I lost you.
This one?
No, there was 88, and then
96.
96 was the next model, right? And that was a longer stroke.
Yes.
The evolution, so to speak, of the twin cam was 88 to 96. That was and they made some other changes.
And 103, because there was a lot of 103s there too.
So to take this, did this start life as a 96 the CVO model?
No, the CVO, this was purpose-built as a 110. So essentially what this one is this is a 4 3/8 stroke, but now this is a 4-inch bore.
That's what I was getting at. Did they change the stroke or just the bore to get
just
to
the
110?
bore.
So,
Yeah.
so to go from 96 to 110, it's a much bigger piston.
Right. So it's the same stroke, bigger bore.
And the standard bore is 4-inch?
No, this is a 110. That's standard as in not an oversized bore. Yes. 4 3/8 stroke, 4-inch bore for the 110-inch.
4 3/8 stroke and 4-inch bore gives you a 110.
Right.
So what
The
is
3
so
and 7/8 piston gave you the 103 with the same stroke.
Okay, so in the standard 96 dyno would have been a 4 3/8 stroke and a 3 7/8 piston.
No, it's even smaller than that. To tell you the truth, I don't even remember
Okay.
offhand. Nobody
All right.
ever.
Just
built that one.
curious because I you know I don't know I'm just.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
I think it's something that a lot of people who ride Harleys and Dynas
They don't realize.
They
Sure.
may not know exactly what the evolution
Yeah.
was, and there is a stigma, like because we sell a lot of pre-owned bikes here, older
Sure.
bikes. A lot of people like on the older Dyna, they want to know, was the cam chain tensioner done? You know, was the recall
Sure,
done?
yeah. Well, most certainly, the earlier ones, that was an issue. The very early ones, actually, Harley originally had on the cam support plate here. I don't have this apart, and plus, you don't have that style, but originally they had a ball bearing on both this one and this one, the front and rear cams.
Yep.
And if you notice, well, if this was together, you would have seen that this, you had your chain out here to drive it off the pinion shaft of the crank, which of course then there's the chain driving the other cam. So in other words, this bearing was getting loads from here and from here. Well, the original ball bearing, okay, wasn't able to handle with all that load, and they were failing. So Harley changed a lot of those when they first came out. But then they switched to a roller bearing, and there wasn't an issue anymore.
So by the time 07 came around, the base Dyna had the better cam chain tensioner, the better bearings. It had most of the improvements, so the longevity was better, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Harley made a lot of changes to make the bike, last longer and eliminate any of those cam chain related problems.
And the difference between a normal Dyna and a CVO, besides all the bling and the upside down forks and everything and the paint, as far as the motor goes, was the big bore 110 cylinders and the Screaming Eagle heads, right?
Yeah, these heads obviously have larger diameter valves and things like that in them. So for
You
a little bit,
had said this was a little bit larger diameter. It was
Intake valve.
Was it 2-inch or?
I think it's even larger than that. I forget offhand on the stock CVO ones, because this, CVO and Screaming Eagle are actually different.
Okay.
CVO, Custom Vehicle Operations, is Harley Davidson. Screaming Eagle is Harley Davidson Aftermarket.
Okay.
So it's a two different things.
So Screaming Eagle OEM these for a Harley Davidson production bike assembly
Right.
line.
Yeah,
so it's definitely a different head than a standard 96-inch
Yes.
Dyna. So
Bigger
you've got
valves,
a bigger bore,
bigger
valves. I'm sure it's
springs.
mapped differently. So
Yep.
this is a much easier bike to hop up. You don't have to buy the big bore kit or the heads to hop it up, right?
Yeah, it definitely has advantages when it comes to that, for sure.
So, anyways, stay tuned. We'll be back shortly with the next step of the project with George from Maroney Harley Davidson.
Just bring this right back to where you were filming before. You can see the rear cylinder head is back on again, except now obviously we have the new high compression pistons in here, which you can see the dome in the top of the piston, where before the other piston was flat, so thus raising our compression ratio. Right. And then of course here, the cam area, now you can see that especially the backing or the cam support plate, like Ken and I were talking about before, which is billet aluminum from Screaming Eagle. Obviously stiffer, sturdier, and of course it has a high volume oil pump in behind it. New cam change, tensioners and everything, and obviously inside there is the cam. So yeah, we're getting to the point now, this thing should be really fun. Button this thing up and get it running here pretty soon.
Excellent.
Fuck yeah, it's like the call of the wild. The call of the wild. Yeah. Fuck yeah. It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Yeah, awesome. Way to go, man.
Not done yet. We got to do all that final tuning and everything I talked to you about, but then we'll have her perfect.
God, that sounds good. I hate the sound of the tuning too. The ride hearts are awful.
Drags, yeah.
It sounds so much better. Wow.
I didn't bother putting the heat shields or anything on. I figured after it was running, you guys could do that stuff.
Custom ignition. 2-in-1 Bassani. Very nice. Probably about 110 horsepower, so 110 cubic inch. Woo! Fuck yeah. It's like grease lightning, baby. Can't wait to rip this thing. George, I just want to thank you very much for building this motor for me.
Sure.
You know,
No
I love
problem, Ken.
Dynas.
I appreciate it.
You know, I love Dynas and FXRs, and
Absolutely.
you've proven you're part of the family here. So I wanted to give you this shirt.
Oh, wow.
And these are our colors. New England Motorcycle Museum.
I'm an
in the
official
back.
club member?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. This is my flag, my cross, and my church. These colors don't run, and these colors don't hide. And if they hit the ground, even in a fight, we'll peel them off with a knife dipped in shit. Here you go, brother. Welcome to the family.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, man.
Thanks. That's pump gas.
Yeah, you're gonna.
Yeah. You want me to get the snowmobile jackets or take it for a ride?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Kaplan America ride, take one.
Send it.
Like I said, when I first got it, you know, I'd heard a lot about the 110 and kind of was lusting after one.
Don't go for 6,000 RPM.
No, it's.
Whap up to 4,000 for a couple of quick gears. You know.
What do you recommend for the break-in procedure?
All right, Ken,
Obviously-
I'm all set.
Once it's up to operating temperature,
Yeah.
you know, ride like you normally would ride. Don't baby it,
Okay.
but don't kill it.
All right.
Just ride it.
Yep.
That's all. But the biggest thing is if you are going to grab a couple of gears even from a light,
Yep.
especially this time of year, make sure the engine's up to temperature.
Okay.
Like right now it is.
Yep.
You know?
Sound lucky, though.
Yeah, it's gonna sound good.
My biggest complaint with it before is it seemed to shut off way too early. You know, it wouldn't rev out.
It wants to keep, if you let it, it'll stretch its legs.
Yeah.
You got to worry about that.
Well,
See how it starts again with it hot. Yeah, it's your battery. It's not kicking back, so the tune's pretty good.
Yeah, the battery's almost dead. I think it's on its way out.
It's working.
It's alive. Thank you.
Daytona can't come soon enough. I don't want to stop riding it.
Like you're having fun. That's good.
Absolutely.
The mapping's close enough for you to ride and break in and everything, so you're good.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much, man. It's
Yeah, no worries.
fucking awesome. I love it.
We just got one thing left to take care of. Parts.
Parts?
The parts.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Come on inside. I'll meet you in the office.
Yeah.